Can you actually get perfect audio in Warzone 2? Or are all of these videos online that claim to give you the best possible audio not telling the full truth? I did a deep dive into audio in Warzone 2 to answer this question, and I think I have an answer, because this is the before, and this is the after. I had to do a lot of research to get this done, including talking to and working with an audio engineer to fully understand how to get the best audio out of Warzone. So if you like this kind of content where you get to learn more, as well as great quickfire shorts and live streams all the way from Monday to Saturday, please subscribe. We're very much on the road to 200k. A new claim has been bouncing around Twitter and on YouTube saying that you can basically enable a super setting to try and get better audio out of Warzone 2. So I decided to break down this claim, and I've also decided to go in depth on how you can get the most out of Warzone 2 in terms of audio and what actually does and doesn't make a difference. So we're going to start with that initial claim that everybody's been talking about on YouTube and Twitter, and then we're going to dive into more real solutions. Now, for those of you who haven't seen these tweets or claims, there is a setting on PC specifically and on some headset providers called Loudness equalisation. And loudness equalisation is effectively a compressor. And what that means and what it does is that it basically stops extremely loud sounds like gunfire and things that are loud in the game like airstrikes from reaching a certain volume point and brings them back down lower and lower, whilst also maintaining the lower audio sounds like footsteps, doors, and reloads to basically give you a more balanced experience. By enabling loudness equalization, you're able to then play the game at 100% volume, because loud sounds like explosions, airstrikes, and things that are just annoying in the game get scaled back, whilst important information like footsteps and other information like that gets a boost from the overall game volume being higher, and thus the effects audio in the game being higher. Now, this claim is kind of a 50-50. It's not exactly untrue, but it's also not great either. Loudness equalization is a cool feature, and it does basically do what it says on the tin by minimizing loud objects. But ultimately, it is a compressor, which means that it's mushing all of the audio signals together and quite literally compressing them. And when you do that, you lose a lot of the sound staging and positional audio that you get in most games. And this is something that's well known in games like Valorant and PUBG. People who have tried this sort of life hack, so to speak, before end up reporting back that they kind of lose positional audio, especially audio over distances when judging things like gunshots. It is true that the footstep audio will be somewhat increased from the maximum volume of Warzone 2, but it really does mush that audio down into a much more compact format that can lose a lot of the existing quality that existed. And this also isn't a silver bullet either, because fundamentally any audio device or audio effects added to a device are still at the mercy of how the game handles audio. And ultimately, compressors are pretty bad at generally handling things that have a wide dynamic range, so lots of low sounds, high sounds, and bits in between. It basically just mushes them all together, which is why loudness EQ isn't really a great idea. It may seem good at first, but in the long run, you're going to notice a much more diminished directional audio experience. Now, before I go into real solutions, it's worth talking about why most of these solutions are only half effective. And that's because of how Warzone 2 handles audio, which is what's known as audio ducking or priority audio. And what that means is that when you have multiple audio files or objects playing in the same space, the game will choose ones to take priority over others. For example, in Warzone 2, if you're firing a gun or somebody next to you is firing a gun, you're going to hear that instead of footstep audio. Whereas if an airstrike comes in, the airstrike will take priority audio over the gunshots, and then the gunshots will take priority audio over the footsteps, which is why 9 times out of 10 when there's an airstrike, you don't hear a damn thing. This system fundamentally means that there are going to be instances in the game where you're never going to hear audio regardless. If there's an airstrike overhead, if you're pulling out a munitions box, if you're firing a weapon, or if there's a loud vehicle nearby, these things directionally and positionally will take priority over you just hearing the footsteps around you. It's why, for example, vehicles are really loud when you're outside, but they kind of quieten down when you're inside because they kind of go down a scale on the priority list. So regardless of what effects, what equalization, what settings you apply to any given headset, you are always going to be at the mercy of this existing feature, and priority audio is always going to be a part of Warzone 2. So if you hear an airstrike, just look at a staircase or a ladder, because I can guarantee you won't hear somebody coming up it. So the next time you have a situation in game where something really loud is taking place next to you, you effectively should be aware in game that you can no longer rely on audio to make something happen. It's going to be purely visual, whether that's watching a push, watching a staircase, or watching a ladder. Priority audio ducking means that there are some things you're just simply not going to hear for specific conditions. And it's why whenever an airstrike goes off, pros will either use that as a way to push other buildings, or will basically watch their own staircases or ladders during an airstrike to minimize the damage. So with all of this in mind, is there really anything you can do to make the audio in Warzone 2 better on both console and PC? Well, to start with, you can EQ. And ultimately, an EQ will boost the lower frequencies that you'll hear in game. And this won't help everything, this will only help the sort of bassy, dull tones that you tend to find with clunky footsteps. Things like climbing ladders tend to be slightly higher frequency because of the metal clang sound. But boosting the lower frequencies and slightly increasing that overall bassy feel will not always help everything, but it may sometimes give a bit more presence and volume to some of those footsteps around you. But of course, that will apply to everything in the game as well. So what is the real solution? Well, the answer to that is something that's called a limiter. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I don't know of any gaming headsets that offer limiters in their software or out of the box, because limiters tend to come as audio effects which are VST files, and you can only use these on certain softwares such as Voicemeeter, which is very popular on PC, or in my case the Elgato Wavelink software. Those softwares effectively separate your audios into different streams and then play it back to your headset. For example, my game audio comes out of Elgato Wavelink in brackets game. So I can apply various VST and audio effects to and from this individual track and try and mix it in a way that works for me. Now, whereas Loudness equalisation, which is basically a bad compressor, mushes everything together and kind of makes things a little bit muddy, a limiter kind of does the opposite. A limiter is effectively like a brick wall in your audio stream, where if the audio gets past a certain level of loudness, it just instantly reduces it by the amount of decibels that you want. So all I had to do was measure the average maximum sound of a footstep, or the metal clang of a ladder, or the metal clang of the interior of a building or wood, and then compare that to the maximum sound of a gunshot. And I used these settings to basically make it pretty much impossible for gunshots to be super loud, but retain 100% audio in Warzone without actually destroying my ears. So everything like footsteps and all of those other important details and metal clangs and all those little bits and pieces actually have boosted volume because the game's at 100% audio, but when things get too loud, the entire audio track isn't getting compressed, just the sounds over that loudness scale are being massively reduced. Which means that you can keep most of the sound staging within Warzone 2 and all of the good audio elements without mushing the overall audio into one slightly more compressed and weird dynamic space. I'm using a VST called Loudmax, but there are loads of other limiters out there that you can check out, and ultimately this has been fantastic. I can hear loads of footsteps, but the second I fire a gun, it's pretty much muted, and the before and after really shows that it kind of maintains those important sounds whilst decreasing less important sounds. Unfortunately, this isn't available on any console headset that I know of, and even if you're on PC, you'll have to basically try and split all of your audio streams using something like Voicemeeter, or you'll have to own an Elgato piece of kit like the Wave XLR or microphone to even have access to this software. So it isn't a simple and cut solution, but it is really the only solution that exists. And even then, you're still at the mercy of how Warzone 2 as a game handles its engine audio. So this isn't a silver bullet, but it does actually do something. That's about it for this video today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. And please bear in mind that I've had to glaze over lots of important audio wizardry with fairly simplistic terms. If you found this video useful, feel free to check out some of my other settings videos, which give you guys really in-depth analysis on how to get the best out of your game. As always, subscribe, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.